It's a good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy, back with Hometown Commander, and we are back for our final episode of Millsy Brews for the week. Martha Machines has given us so much good stuff, and today we are looking at our next commander from the Commander decks. Today we're looking at Sabar Jabari of Zhalfir from the Knights Precon. But today, just like our episode that started the week, today is actually not my deck list. My friend Andrew, who is a co-host with me on the Commander Brew Crew podcast over on the channel, submitted this list today for the channel. And I hope you guys enjoy other people brewing decks for the channel, not just me. I hope you guys see the difference in our brewing styles, and you get to see some different fun for the decks that are coming across to you. Remember that Millsy Brews, no matter who's doing them, is a show where we put forth to you our version 1.0 deck lists without testing, but doing our best to get it as good as we can to get down on the table for either us or y'all to try testing on our quest to outbrew your favorite Magic channel. Sabar Jabari is kind of a really interesting commander because this is the first commander in a very long time to have an Eminence. Sabar Jabari is a 1 white, blue-black, 4/3 legendary creature, human knight. Friend Knights are back, and they're back in Esper, which is a pretty cool color combination for them. Eminence, whenever you attack with one or more knights, if Sabar Jabari is in the command zone or on the battlefield, so that's where the Eminence comes in, doesn't matter where it's at, draw a card, then discard a card. So that's pretty cool. We get to attack, so we get a free kind of military intelligence in our commander, which is kind of great. Flying first strike, so it already comes out flying, which is great. It means give it a little bit of evasion in the air, and then whenever it deals combat damage to a player, return target knight creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. All right, so Esper Knights. Knights are a great creature type, been around for a long time, of course. Most of the Knights that we saw were in Eldraine, and they were in Mardu, of course, with Sir Gwynedd, is one of Andrew's favorite commanders of all time, and a lot of the things that he's done with this type. Of course, he was very excited to try them in a different color combination, and I think we got a lot of interesting things in this new color combination, including a very fun new knight that we'll talk about that I think is going to end up causing some trouble. Starting out with the Landylands, again, really solid mana base. I think Josh did his mana base pretty great on Monday at the start of the week, and I think Andrew did pretty great in his mana base as well. This looks like a pretty darn close mana base to the Precon. I don't know what the Precon came with mana base wise, but I would imagine this is darn close, if not the exact same. I don't know if a Darker Wastes was in the Precon, but it could have been. Could have been them trying to get that reprint there. Love Arcane Sanctum. If you're not going to play the fetches and the shocks and all that good stuff, play as many of these Tri-lands as you can. Rafine's Tower might have been a solid upgrade here, but I'm not sure what level he wanted to update it. This looks like a pretty budget version, so I'm guessing he just upgraded the Precon slightly. So not as much in the mana base there, but that probably would be my choice to throw in a Rafine's Tower. Up to the enchantments, we got just two, and they're two pretty great ones. Chivalric Alliance. Whenever you attack with two or more creatures, draw a card. So here's her military intelligence type effect, but for two, we can discard a card to make a blue and white knight creature token of vigilance. This is great because we can discard a creature, and then if we have Jabari out, we can get it back when it deals damage. So that's pretty great. And then Knight's Charge. Whenever a knight you control attacks, each opponent loses a life and you gain a life. That's going to get tough depending on how many creatures we have, isn't it? And then for 8 mana, we can return all knight cards from our graveyard back to the battlefield. I love cards like Knight's Charge because it pays off us attacking with just a ton of creatures. And this is what we already want to do in this deck, right? Go wide, attack, hurt our opponents, and this is going to make it even harder. So if we have 8 creatures on attack, everyone loses 8 and we gain 8 before we even get into damage, before we even get into combat. All right, artifacts. We're seeing a lot of great stuff here. A lot of good mana ramp. We have Arcane Signet, Azorius Signet. We have a lot of things in white and then and blue as well. So the signets make sense. We see Azorius and Orsef Signet. I think we're probably pretty centered in white in this deck, so it makes sense to have those two and not have the Dimir Signet. Fellwar Stone is probably going to be really great in the deck. Commander Sphere, Soul Ring, and Mind Stone. Mind Stone is great to get us that card. Herald's Horn going to drop the cost of all of our knights by 1, which is pretty great. Conjurer's Mantle, +1/+1, and Vigilance for the equipped creature. Whenever a equipped creature attacks, look at the top 6. You may reveal a card that shares a creature type with that creature from among them and put it in your hand. I think this is probably a pretty good card to put on Sidar. You get him some Vigilance, have him hit a little bit harder, and then you know everything in the deck's going to share a type with him, so that's pretty great. It's going to just get you more value. Sigiled Sword of Valor, one of my favorite equipments of all time. Creature gets +2/+0, has vigilance and is a knight in addition to its other types. Whenever it attacks, you get a 2/2 white knight creature token that's vigilance with it, that's attacking. So this is great because we're extending the amount of creatures we have, and it's going to help us out with some other effects that we could potentially have in the deck. But I think just getting wider is even better. And then Vanquisher's Banner, just a flat plus, and drawing a card every time we cast a night spell is going to help us churn through our deck. He's not choosing to play very much. Not choosing to play the Kindred Discoveries or anything like that of the world. So I think Vanquisher Banner is going to help us out a lot in that. Getting into the spells, Despark, Path to Exile, Return the Dust, Swords to Plows for our removal. Pull from Tomorrow is going to give us some card draw. Unbreakable Formation is not only a protection spell, but it also just allows us to give all of our creatures vigilance for the turn, which is going to help us out a ton. And then he's choosing to play the Entomb. The Entomb's great for Sidar, of course, because Sidar can get that creature back. So why not go put a creature you want into the graveyard and then get it back with Sidar Jabari? That makes a ton of sense. It's probably going to come in really important once we talk about some of the crazy good new knights we got out of this deck. Damn. Supreme Verdict, Time Wipe for our board wipes. Damn, one of my favorite board wipes of all time, not just for the name, just because it's very tough to deal with. Supreme Verdict, one of the most popular board wipes of all time, can't be countered. And then Time Wipe allowing you to pick probably your commander back up and destroy everything else, or pick something really relevant back up and destroy everything else. So that's pretty helpful because you can keep that thing. Vindicates, just destroy target permanent. This gets and hits anything. Feed the Swarm, very similar as well. Going to hit creatures or enchantments. Distant Melody, going to draw cards equal to the number of permanents, equal to the number of knights we control, which is great. It's going to be a lot and going to get us a lot. And then some Read the Bones. Read the Bones is one of Andrew's favorite cards. He plays it in a lot of his Mardu decks. And so Read the Bones is here for some more card draw. Well, friends, 34 knights. I don't think we're going to go through every knight because, to be 100% honest, some of them are just there to be there. What I really want to do is talk about the knights, the new knights that are really important, and the knights that just end up really affecting our game plan. So, Acclaimed Contender when enters the battlefield. If you control another knight, you look at the top 5. You may reveal a knight or equipment or legendary artifact from them, put it in your hands. This is great. It's going to help you dig for more. Adeline, who I did not realize was a knight, but this is absolutely killer. Her power is equal to the number of creatures you control, and when she attacks, she makes some humans that are tapped in attacking each player. This is for each opponent you attack, or each opponent at all. This is great. The fact that she's a knight, I thought she was a soldier, to be 100% honest. So this is killer because she's one of the best knights we've gotten in the last 2 years, and just her ability to be a giant creature, have vigilance, and then make things when you're attacking. No, those things are humans and not human knights when they're attacking, but I don't think you care. I think you'll happily take the next thing out of your opponent. Ariel, Knight of Windgrace, getting another chance to beat another deck. Love this card. 2 and a white, tap it to make a token. Black, tap X knights you control, destroy target creature with power X or less. This is great because this gives you another option for removal to get around things. And this gets around your opponents having counter spells because they have to have counter spells that counter abilities and not spells, right? So this is kind of cool. It's a little bit more targeted, and it is at instant speed. So if you were able to make a bunch of knights at instant speed or haven't attacked with them or they have vigilance, you can use this on someone else's turn to kind of up your value you can get out of your knights. Corpse Knight's another great one. Whenever a creature enters battlefield under your control, each opponent loses a life. This is great because we're trying to make tokens. There's a lot of cards in the deck that care about making tokens. And there's a lot of, cards in these 3 colors that make tokens anyway. So Corpse Knight is pretty great. It pairs really well with something like Alenda and Azor, who are the alternate commander from this deck, who one of my favorite new cards from this deck. Whenever it attacks, you may pay X and Esper. When you do, you draw X cards. But the last card's effects, I think, even more important. At the beginning of each end step, you may pay 4 life. If you do, create a number of 1/1 black vampire knight creature tokens with lifelink equal to the number of cards you draw on this turn. Friends, that's each end step. It's not just your end step. So if you can draw cards on other people's turns, I think this is where cards like Rhystic Study or Mystic Remora or things like that would become a little bit better with Alenda Azor, but of course we're not guaranteed to see this all the time. But Alenda and Azor I think is going to come really good in this deck because we're going to draw a bunch of cards on our turn, so we're going to make a bunch of tokens at the end of our turn. But I like it. I think this is a great new card. It's a great commander in its own right, but I'm intrigued to see what it does in the 99 of a deck like this. Either Sword Justicator, 1 white, black, tap to destroy target creature or enchantment. So here we go. Here's another piece of removal on a creature, and that's pretty great. And then 2 and a white, 2 and a blue to untap it. So that's pretty cool. I like the idea of us having removal at instant speed on creatures and not just on spells. So that becomes pretty important. Exsanguinator Cavalry, a new card from the deck. Menace Lifelink. Whenever a knight you control deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature and create a blood token. It's an artifact with 1 tap. Discard a card, sacrifice this artifact, draw a card. I think this works really well with Sidar, and here's the reason why. Sidar brings things back from your graveyard to the battlefield, right? When it deals combat damage, right? So what you can do with that blood token is you can pitch a creature during combat. Remember, because blood tokens can be used at any time. Discard that creature, draw a new card, and then Sidar is going to deal the damage and bring that creature back. So the blood tokens are actually really helpful because in a lot of ways they're going to help you cheat out some creatures that you don't necessarily want to play, or you don't have the mana to play this turn. Hacken Stronggull's Courage, another new card. You may cast from your graveyard, but not from anywhere else. You can only cast it from your graveyard. As long as it's on the battlefield, you may cast night spells from your graveyard. When it dies, you lose 2 life. Okay, so here's another really interesting card, right? This is a card we might want to put into the graveyard with that blood token or with another effect. Of course, Sidar can still bring it back from the graveyard, but we really want to get it down because then we can get all of those knights back, right? We can get them all back from the graveyard, get them all recurring them back and still useful for us. Hawkins is very interesting. I actually really like this card. Again, another perfect example of this deck bringing us good cards for this strategy to help it win the game. And I'm saying that because the next card is probably the single best card we got in this deck, including our commander. And there's only one other card that I agree that might be second to this card, and that's Herald of Hoofbeats. Human Knight, 3 and a blue, horsemanship. Creatures you control have horsemanship. Friend, free unblockable for all of your knights is going to lead to you winning the game. Horsemanship says this creature can't be blocked except by creatures with horsemanship. Of course, a famous callback to another blue creature that gave all your creatures horsemanship. Herald of Hoofbeats is going to help you finish the game. And the best part about this is Sidar has first strike, which means if it first strikes first and you bring this back from the battlefield, you could make, never mind then. Sorry, blocks would be before damage, never mind. But if you can get this out somehow, your knights become unblockable and you're just going to probably end up winning the game. There's so many ways we can buff our crew. There's so many ways we can do so many things. I think Herald of Hoofbeats is the exact reason why someone would want to play Esper Knights. Not only is it just the card draw, not only is it just the extra movement, not only is it just the buffs that you get from other things, I think Herald of Hoofbeats is the reason to play Esper Knights, and it looks so good. Yes, it is 1 card of the 99. Yes, we have to find it, but with the amount of card draw we have, Andrew doesn't really like playing a ton of tutors, but if we go into a deck that has more tutors, if we go into a deck that has more things like that, you could always find Herald of the Hoofbeats, and it's a card that's going to end up ending the game, and it doesn't have to attack. It doesn't have to attack to give those creatures the horsemanship, which means if you reanimated this thing, if you put it in your graveyard with Entomb and then reanimated it, you could do so many things with this, and literally you're just going to end the game even quicker, and I love it. Hero Bladehold got a great reprint with some pretty new art. Has a battle cry whenever it attacks, you put 2 soldier tokens that are tapped and attacking. But the battle cry is great. Each other attacking creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn, and that's pretty cool. Knight Exemplar getting a pretty reprint here. This is the Secret Lair reprint that it got. Other Knight creatures you control get +1/+1 have indestructible. Perfect. Protect the whole board. Get us going that way. Knight of the White Orchid, of course, great card here. If an opponent controls more lands than you search the library for a plains, put it on the battlefield, and shuffle. That's great because earlier in the game when you're probably going to be down on lands anyway, you're going to kind of get that ability to catch back up on lands, which is the great part about No, White Orchid. Liliana's Standard Bearer is not something I've really ever paid attention to, so let's read it. When it enters the battlefield, draw X cards where X is the number of creatures that died under your control this turn. That's pretty great. This pairs pretty well with Elenda and Azor, or just getting you some cards back. I like it. It's a 3/1. It's a decent body. It's pretty good. Locthwain Lancer, another new card. Whenever a non-token knight you control dies, each opponent loses life and you gain life. Wow, that's great. I mean, it has menace, so it's already a great body on its own. But what it does is it's going to make your target, your attacks even better, right? You can attack without any fear of getting punished, because as soon as your knights die, your opponents are going to lose life for it, and hopefully you have a ton of tokens that you're making to back them up. So I like Locthwain Lance. It's kind of interesting, a little expensive for my liking, but I think it's kind of cool for what it does. Marshal of Zhalfir from the set. Of course, every tribe needs a good pumper. Other knights you control get plus and plus ones, you're just pumping the board, and then blue and a white tap another target creature. This is great. We can tap a blocker out of the way. We can do a lot of things, but the pump effects are really great, and they're going to really help us when it comes to different things. Murderous Rider, a little bit of removal, and then just comes down as a lifelinker, and then when it dies, we put it on the bottom of our library, which is pretty cool. Silverwing Squadron, another one of my favorite knights. I've really only ever used this in other decks, but seems probably pretty good in this deck. When it comes in, it's power tough. Well, it's power tough for each equal to the number of creatures you control, which is great. The more knights we have, the bigger this thing is, and it's in the air. And whenever it attacks, we make a number of 2/2 white creature tokens with vigilance equal to the number of opponents you have. So on attack, we're already going to potentially make 3 more creatures, and this thing is in the air, so it's going to make it pretty tough to deal with. I love Silverwing Squadron. It's a little expensive, but I feel like this is probably the perfect target for Sidar bringing it back from the graveyard or reanimating this somehow. This is kind of like the perfect target for that. Skyhunter Strike Force, a new card from the Phyrexia Commander decks. I think it's perfect for this deck. It says melee, but it's whenever this creature attack gets +1/+1 for each opponent you attack this combat. So if we attack all of our opponents, it gets +3/+3. And then as long as you control your commander, other creatures you control have melee. This is great. It's going to make the attacks even better. This is the kind of card, 3 mana comes down, and it's going to help us out a lot in combat. I see he went full Eldraine flavor here, which I really like. We're playing all of the Sirs, all of the legendary knights from Eldraine. First up, Sir Aelin, the Lion's Claw. Whenever it attacks, other creatures you control get +1/+1 on turn, just giving other creatures a little bit of buff. Sir Eleonora, its power and tough is equal to the number of cards in power is equal to the number of cards in your hand. Whenever it enters battlefield, draw cards. Spells your opponents cast that target, it costs 2 more to cast. Well, here's another draw enabler for Elenda and Azor, or just finding us to the other cards that we need. And then, of course, Sir Conrad, probably the one that's most known out of all of them. Whenever another creature dies or a creature is put in the graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, or a creature card leaves your graveyard, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. This is great because all of the tokens we make that die ping our opponents. Or if we bring things back, with Sidara, it deals a damage smoke. Conrad's probably the best of these 3. And then for 1 in a black, each player mills a card, which is going to end up dealing 4 damage. Potentially, depending on how many creatures get milled that way. The Council of Four, a card that Andrew's been very high on for a long time. I'm intrigued to see where this card fits into the deck. Whenever a player draws their second card during their turn, you draw a card. Well, that's great. And then whenever a player casts their second spell during your turns, you get a Night Creature token. Well, there we go. Make those tokens on other people's turns. Council of Four isn't a knight itself, but it's a decent blocker. But it is a human, so it does share a type with Sidar. So if we wanted to use Path of Ancestry or something like that, we could still get the buffs there. Valiant Knight, other knights get +1/+1. And then for 5 mana, Knights we control get Double Strike. Love this card. This is an older card, but I always love seeing it come back for Knights decks because it has so much value. Probably my vote for the second best new Knight is Vidalian Wave Knight. Whenever you draw a card, you put a counter on each other Merfolk or Knight you control. And this is killer because there's so many other ways to draw cards in the deck. The higher up in the pay scale you go with this deck. And so Vidalian Wave Knight is just going to put a ton of counters on your board. We, of course, have already seen some ways in the deck to draw cards on opponents' turns. That's going to put counters on all our knights. If we're drawing cards on our own turn, that's going to, of course, put counters on all of our knights. I really like this card. Yes, it's a 4-mana 3/3, but the more counters we put on, the worse it's going to get for our opponents. If we had any way to really get this more consistently, if we wanted to, we could always add in something like Herald of the Secret Streams, or go for that +1/+1 counters route as well. But I really like the go wide aspect of the Knights. Vona, Butcher of Magan, comes back. Love this card. Back to Ixalan, one of my favorite planes of all time. Vigilance and Lifelink, so it's a decent 4/4 body with Vigilance and Lifelink. We can pay 7 life to destroy target non-land permanent. Activate onto your turn. Another piece of removal hits any non-land permanent, and it has lifelink, so it's going to gain us that 7 life back pretty quickly. Love Vona, of course, the leader of the vampires in Ixalan, and I absolutely love that card. Got a couple new uncommons. Xeric Strobe Knight, Flying Vigilance, make a 2/2 white creature token with Vigilance, activate only if you've cast 2 or more spells this turn. That's pretty cool. It's a 2/2 with Flying and Vigilance on its own, so it's a nice little body, and then it can make a token, so that's pretty cool. And then Zhalfirian Lance, whenever another knight enters the battlefield under your control, it gets +1/+1 in Vigilance on turn. So again, another good little body to hit for damage. And then we are playing one battle, and this is probably the best battle for this deck. Invasion New Phyrexia, X, white, blue. When it enters the battlefield, create X/2/2 white and blue knight creature tokens with Vigilance. Oh man, just perfect. Get a bunch of knights, and then on the back, once we kill the battle, once we attack it, We get Teferi, Akosa of Zhalfir. +1, draw 2 cards, and then discard 2 cards unless you discard a creature card. This is kind of good because we can draw 2 cards, pitch a creature, and then get it back with Sidar. So this is great already. -2, you get an emblem with knights you control, get +1/+0, and have Void 1. Well, that's great. Just protects all of our knights just that little bit. It gives them a buff, and then -3, tap any number of untapped creatures you control. When you do, shuffle target non-land permanent opponent controls with mana value X or less into its opponent's library, where X is the number of creatures tapped this way. This is great because we can tap all those tokens. We can tap a bunch of other things and just start getting things out of the way. And then we can start building back up Teferi. We really like the +1 in this way because we've already seen cards that care about drawing cards. The Vidalian Wave Knight is going to give us counters when we draw cards. Elenda and Azor can get us those tokens at the end of turn. You already see there's a bunch of cards in the deck that care about drawing cards. Teferi does a really great job at coming in and bolstering up that strategy. So, guys, let me know what you think. This is Andrew's Sidar Jabari of Zhalfir deck. I really like this Knights deck. It's a deck that's kind of been on my list maybe once I test all the other things that I want to test for the set, and I kind of look into some of the other decks that I'm looking at in the set. This is a deck I want to come back to because I think there's so many great things here. I've been looking for a good Esper tokens deck, a good Esper Go Wide deck, and I think this is a pretty cool deck in its own right. My only problem is I'm still stuck between Marneus Calgar and something like this. Marneus Calgar seems like a perfect deck for something like this. Some of these knights seem like they'd be perfect in a deck like that. But of course, you'd have to strip away that knight sub-theme to do it. So I'm not 100% sure, but man, I love the new knights. I love the new cards. And I'd love to see even what I could do with this deck. If you want to see that, let me know down in the comments. Maybe down the line we can do my own version of Sidar Jabari of Zhalfir. I've also considered building something around Elenda and Azor that'll be coming on in a couple weeks. We're going to do Elenda and Azor because I saw a deck list in a video that I really liked for that one, and I want to tinker with it some more and see what I can do with it, drawing cards and making tokens that way. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments, and I'll make sure to get Josh on Monday's video and Andrew on today's video to come in and some comments as well of what you guys think about their decks. Like if you like the content, subscribe if you want to join me on my quest to outbrew your favorite Magic channel. And friends, I will catch you later.